listening to the best of the Martha Zoller Show. To hear the full show each day, tune in to AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN or log in to accesswdun.com and click the Listen Live button from 9 to 11 Monday through Friday. Terry England is joining me right now. He's a former state representative who I have quoted often from conversations that we have had. And then he is the chief of staff for Jon Burns, the Speaker of the House. And early in the session, he had an accident that changed the direction of his life. Terry England, welcome to the program. Welcome back.
Well, good morning, Martha. I hope you're doing well.
I am doing great. So just tell us a little bit, especially about when the accident happened and how quickly you were able to get some help.
Well, it was, God looks after fools sometimes, and he looked after me that day for certain. Was operating a piece of farm equipment, a skid steer, didn't have my seatbelt on like I should have, and as I've told others, I kind of got dribbled in the cab between the seat and the roof of the machine about 5 times, and when I came to a rest, came to a stop, couldn't move my legs, couldn't move my arms, couldn't even breathe. I had to make myself breathe at that point. And shortly thereafter, my neighbor and my dad both got to the machine, and they were able to call 911, and Barrow County EMS got there very quickly and got us to the Trauma Center at Gainesville, Northeast Georgia Health System. They opened the tower that morning, and we were trauma patient number 1. Certainly not something that we aimed to be, but just thank the good Lord that the Trauma Center is there and the level 1 designation is there in Gainesville now. Carol Burrell and her team worked mighty hard for a long time to get that designation up there, and we were able to help some behind the scenes through the years with that, and had no idea that it would ever be something that would directly benefit myself, but I'm thankful it was there.
Do you know about how long it was from the time you had the accident till you got to the hospital?
Probably within an hour.
Yep.
I know the ambulance driver was given clearance to use lights and sirens the whole way up, and he was able to cut about 12 minutes off the trip from they said it was going to be an ETA of 36 minutes, and about 23 minutes later we were pulling in up there, and I was actually on the surgery table in less than 12 hours after the accident, having the surgery on my spine and having two railroad irons put back there where they did a 7-level fusion from the base of my skull down to the middle of my shoulders.
Now, were you awake most of this time?
Yeah, I actually was. Blacked out some right after the accident, blacked out some while they were getting me out of the machine. But from that point forward, pretty much conscious the entire ride to Gainesville and then up until they put me into surgery.
Well, I knew that lots of people would be reaching out to you, and I reached out to you a couple times by text message because I said, I'm here in Gainesville. Literally, I can basically see Northeast Georgia Health System from our studio.
Right.
And so I got a message back from your wife. This is Terry's phone, but this is his wife. Thank you so much. Because I think that probably you were a little overwhelmed, or she was a little overwhelmed with all the support she was getting, although y'all were happy to have it.
No doubt about it. We have been so blessed. It has been overwhelming with the number of people that have reached out, the number of people that have been praying for us, the number of answered prayers. Almost daily, things are happening, improvements are happening that there's no way that it happens other than it's an answered prayer. And it's certainly been overwhelming to me and to Cindy both, to see the love that we've got from people all across the state and people that have been friends for 20 or 30 years, and we may not have had a chance to talk to them, the last 10 or 15 that have reached out and just said, heard about it, praying for you, love you, let us know what you need, and we're glad to come help. It's been incredible.
So you had to get stabilized, obviously, at Northeast Georgia Medical Center, and you were there for a couple of weeks, right, or a week or so before you
about a week and a half. Yeah.
About a week and a half, and then you go to Shepherd Spinal Center, which is one of the premier facilities in the world for the kind of work that you needed.
It is an incredible place. I see miracles happening here. Literally see miracles happening here every day. Seeing people, lots of young people that are here, from wrestling accidents to skiing accidents to car accidents. Lots and lots of car accidents, and see the miracle of a 17 or 18-year-old that's been in a wheelchair for 6 or 8 weeks stand for the first time and be able to actually start walking. And remember back about 8 or 9 weeks ago when I stood for the first time and started walking again. And, what a blessing it is to see that. And this place is a place which miracles happen daily.
So what does it look like for you right now? Where are you in your recovery?
We're about a week out from moving to what is called day program, which Shepherd is kind of leading edge on what they do as it relates to that. They have apartments here that you actually move into and start learning how to have an independent life again, without nursing care 24/7, 365. Move into that, start learning what some of the little shortcomings that you still have that you need help in learning how to do again. One of mine is going to be learning how to button a shirt again because I got fingers that don't work correctly. But we'll be there for 2 to 4 weeks, maybe as much as 6 weeks, but we're hoping more in the 2-week range.
Of course you are.
what the good Lord has in store for us there, and then we'll transition home and kind of start moving back into regular everyday life at that point.
So how's this been impacted on your family? I know you mentioned Cindy, but how's this impacted your family?
My dad lives with us. He's 81 years old. It's shaken him pretty bad. I'm an only child, and so it shook him pretty bad. But at the same time, he's been seeing the miracles too, and I think it actually has drawn us a little bit closer to each other, certainly. But I mean, you put everything on hold. Cindy's been with me ever since the accident happened, and she's been home one time without me since the accident on February the 8th. And other than that, she's been here in Atlanta with me and working remote. And I've been trying to do as much remote work as I could. Like I told them, I said, I might not can move my arms and legs like I'm supposed to, but my brain still works. So we're going to stay engaged. So it's been a challenge, but we've adapted to it. And certainly the folks here at Shepherd have been incredible in making that adaptation too.
Yeah, I mean, they are an amazing facility. Alana Shepherd has been very kind to me throughout the years. I've never had to use their services, but I've been involved in some of the programs down there and helping to promote them or to be involved and see what they're doing. And, of course, about 25 years ago, we had a young lady from Gainesville who was in a terrible accident that came through her recovery at Shepherd Spinal Center. And that's when I first learned about Shepherd Spinal Center and have been involved ever since. And, they do amazing work there, and and I love that they have the ability to transition you to be able to find out what life's going to be like for you in the future. And I think it's going to be as close to what it was as you can get it, right?
Well, that's my intention. We'll see what the Lord has in store for us, but our intention is to be as much back to normal as possible. You mentioned Mrs. Shepherd, and she is a sport model, 94, about to turn 95, and she is every every few days she comes rolling into the room here and giving me a lecture or asking me questions about whatever, and asking for some command performances. She's had a couple things here that she's strongly suggested that I attend, and so we've done that. And we spoke to the Board of Trustees earlier this week here. She'd asked me to do that and just kind of talk about our journey a little bit too. So she's while she's rolling around here doing a lot of things, she's still involved in patient therapy as well, making us stretch and do things that we don't think we can do.
Well, I don't know if you remember this, but one of the first conversations we've had, I don't think it was the first one, but it was the first long one we had. We were talking about budgets, and it was during the time when the budget was really difficult. And you said, it's not hard saying no when you don't have any money. It's hard to say no when there's plenty of money. So I have used that many times.
And that is so true. And Chairman Hatchett and I had that conversation several times this past session. I'm like, everybody thinks having money is a blessing, but it's a pain.
Well, and there's so much good work we need to do. I mean, I'm sure that this opened your eyes into the healthcare world, which you were pretty knowledgeable about, but it's never the same as when you're using the system. So it opened your eyes to a number of things. But I had a great hour with Kevin Tanner here on the program a couple of weeks ago, and the work we need to do on the mental health side is astronomical also. So there's lots of options of good things we can do, and we just got to balance it in the right way.
And it is a tough thing to figure out. I wound up, when I became chairman of PROPS back in 2011, realized that I needed to learn really quick where 25% of the budget was going to, which was into healthcare in general, and had to kind of become a haphazard expert on the subject matter, and still have so much to learn. And what I understand about it pales to what Sharon Cooper and Butch Parrish and Mark Newton and several others and Lee Hawkins understand about health care. But, it is a huge component of what we spend in state funds, and there's still so much that we need to do. And there's so many things that we could do to simplify stuff too, but because of the way that Medicaid and Medicare are structured, it makes it almost impossible for the states to come in and simplify it and make it work for the state instead of working for, CMS in Washington, D.C.
Well, and there's so many things that we need to work on, but at the same time, I always talk about personal responsibility. There's so many things that human beings could do. I mean, my husband is a primary care physician. He's closed his office, and he now is involved in correctional medicine, and where we're getting into that mental health world and doing all of that. But one of the things he always said is that if people, quit drinking, smoking, and started eating right, I wouldn't have anything to do. And so many of the problems that people have are self-inflicted, and it takes up resources for the things like that happen to you. And not that that's a criticism. It's just the truth. It's just the truth.
Well, we are many times our own worst enemy. And that is so true. I mean, it is, we all have our vices, whether it be candy or whatever, and it those things get a hold of us, and it's hard to break that cycle.
Absolutely. Terry England, we are so happy to be able to talk to you. We have prayed for you every single day since this happened. And also, I've prayed very hard for your wife, because I know she has carried a huge burden throughout all this period of time. But I want to thank you so much for giving us your time today.
Well, Martha, thank you for the prayers. Thank you for those that are listening that are our friends. Thank you for the prayers that they've offered. I'd ask that y'all continue to do so. And I'd ask that you continue to pray for the therapist and all the folks here and the patients here. When you see it day to day, you realize what a struggle it is for a lot of these folks, and it's something to behold. But like I said, there's miracles happening every day here, and I just want to thank everybody for the prayers.
And you have a blessed Easter.
All right, y'all too.
It's where North Georgia comes to talk. It's the Martha Zoller Show on AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN.
You know, we're kind of starting on this path here in Georgia to school choice. And while we haven't, and I'm on the State Board of Education, and they put me on the State Board of Education knowing that I was a person that supported school choice. We are on the path there, but there are other states that are a little farther along than we are. Of course, Mississippi has just done an amazing job since 2012 in providing choice as well as improving the product of the student education that they have. But Texas is in this fight too. And Genevieve Collins is joining me from Americans for Prosperity Texas. And as you guys know, Americans for Prosperity is one of my favorite groups. I think I love the work that they do. They're not partisan, but they are understanding where the people are and what's best. Genevieve, welcome back to the program.
Thanks, Martha. Thrilled to be here and thrilled to share the great news of what's going on in Texas.
Yeah, so tell us about the school choice movement in Texas and where you are right now.
Well, it has been a 40-year movement in the making that has finally culminated with success. As of 2:05 this morning, the Texas House has passed school choice policy. And I say the Texas House of Representatives because the Texas Senate has passed school choice, I think, 6 sessions in a row. And our legislature meets every 2 years. And so for the last 12 years, the Senate has passed school choice, but the Texas House of Representatives has always been the place where that bill has gone to die. And last night, we had the votes to pass the largest school choice program in American history, funding $1 billion of school choice programs for over 100,000 kids.
So how is that going to work? What kind of program are you all doing?
So this is a universal education savings account. You know, critics always say, oh, these are vouchers. No, this is not a voucher. This is an education savings account. And that's been what's really started to become commonplace among red states over the last few years. Our education savings accounts are going to be run and administered by our comptroller, our state treasurer, if you will. And the prioritization for these students is that we really want to make sure that every student is universally eligible, but we're going to prioritize enrollment or use of an ESA for students with disabilities and students that are in low-income families. We want to make sure that those kids get the first options to get out of a bad system or where they're not, that's not meeting their needs, and to be able to go to the school of their choice and thrive.
And what has been the pushback? Because, Texas is a pretty much a right-to-work state like Georgia is, correct?
Sure.
So,
yes.
So while there are probably teachers' associations, they're not as strong, or have they been in the way of this?
Oh, my goodness, Martha, the teachers' unions have come out in force in Texas. It's while we are a right-to-work state, the teachers' unions and the various school board associations have been basically saying that this program will absolutely defund public schools, which is just factually incorrect. The funding mechanism for this $1 billion is coming from our state surplus. In Texas, we're blessed to have a raging oil and gas industry and a whole bunch of other Fortune 500 companies that move here that have created a $24 billion surplus. And so we are able to actually fund the entire school choice program through that surplus. Meanwhile, as Governor Abbott said in your package leading up, that we're able to also fully fund our public schools from our general revenue fund. And yesterday morning, our public schools got another $8 billion in funding from the Texas legislature. So it's been a wild ride. The opposition has been hyperbolic. They kind of treated this like it was Custer's last stand. And it turns out that after 40 years, it was our side that was ready to go win the final battle.
When I wrote my book, Indivisible United Values for a Divided America, I did a chapter on school choice, and I used the town tuitioning system that they have in Vermont and New Hampshire because everybody thinks of them as liberal states, and they've actually had what they call town tuitioning since the 1850s. And until the 1980s, they actually included parochial schools. They did change that when Howard Dean was the governor of New Hampshire, where they didn't allow parochial schools. But how their model has worked since the 1850s has been that the money followed the child, because there's a lot of small towns in New Hampshire and Vermont, and sometimes really what drove it is they didn't have enough money for every town to have a high school. And so it made more sense to allow kids to move around, even if they crossed county boundaries, to have the money follow the kids. So we have a model in place in a pretty couple of liberal states that's worked since the 1850s. School choice is really how it started, because moms and dads would get together and they'd use the church as a place to have the one-room schoolhouse while they were building something, and they would put it together and they would handle it locally. So there's a lot of history for this. It's the bureaucratization of education that's hurt our children, not families and individuals and communities being involved.
Exactly. And what we've seen in Texas, unfortunately, Martha, that proves your point, is that we can send billions and billions and billions of dollars to school districts, but that money never goes to the classroom. Administrative assistance, that has gone up by 40%. Administrative buildings has gone up by 16%. The amount of money that actually gets funneled to the classroom is a paltry, like 20% of all of the money that we're sending to these public schools. And that's just not right. We need to get the money directly to teachers, directly to the classroom, so that we're improving student outcomes. And what yesterday in Texas showed is that on one side, you've got the Democrats and the unions. All they do is talk about the funding and the money and where it's going. And then you've got the Republicans and the pro-school choice crowd that say, but wait, this is about kids. This is about students and their futures. And it just kind of really highlights the stark differences in how people look at the future of this country and making sure that we're setting up our future, i.e. students, to be successful. This shouldn't be about money. It should be about setting them up for a great future with opportunity.
It's no different than what you're seeing on the federal level, where with every cut that DOJ is finding, which are basically not cuts, the real cuts are not about people. The real cuts are about systems and wasted money on all kinds of things. And I haven't seen a single Democrat that has found a single bit of money that they are happy about saving. It's like, really, is there something in government that you think is wasted spending? Because I haven't seen you point out an example. And I think that when you're talking about our children's education, you've got to read, you've got to write, and you've got to be able to do math. And I am one of these people, you'll hear me say this if you get to know me long enough, Genevieve, is that math is like another language. We would never let a child say they weren't a reading child, but we will let them say they're not a math kid.
Absolutely.
And we cannot do that. It's another language, and we've got to make sure they know how to use it. Now, I want to ask you one more question that's not about education. If you don't know, it's perfectly fine. So there's been big announcements with both Taiwan Semiconductor and NVIDIA talking about building new facilities in Arizona and Texas. That's going to be huge for you guys, isn't it?
It is. And while I may not be totally up to speed on exactly what they're proposing, what I can tell you is that in Texas, we are trying to create the infrastructure where AI and data centers, we are ground zero for this energy-rich environment and this innovation-rich environment that we can really help propel the semiconductor industry and have it be made here in Texas, creating a very high-skilled workforce, but also creating the demand for the products that we need here in Texas. And so, I think Stargate President Trump announced that, I think in his first week in office, that's going to be based in Texas. Google is opening up a brand new AI facility. I mean, Texas is really trying to push the boundaries and be on the precipice of innovation, kind of drafting off of what SpaceX and Blue Origin and NASA have done in the space sector. Why can't we do that in the semiconductor sector as well?
Absolutely.
We have TI here, so we should continue to march.
Well, absolutely. And then Georgia, of course, with us opening the new nuclear power plants, we are positioning ourselves for these big energy areas too. So I think it's going to be a great time for states throughout the Southeast and the Sun Belt. And we're going to take those businesses. We'll be competing for them, Genevieve.
Well, come on, Martha. We'll go to battle. Texans love a good battle.
That's right.
But we're going to enjoy this win today. This battle has been a long, hard-fought one, and I hope to see Georgia follow our footsteps. Listen, if we can hold on for 40 years and create momentum, and what we at AFP did is ensure that we changed the makeup of the legislature. If there were going to be blocks to students, we were going to remove them from their seat, and we did, and that has transitioned our state to now be an education freedom state, and that's what Georgia can be too.
Genevieve Collins, AFP Texas, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks, my dear.
Putting the talk in news talk. It's the Martha Zoller Show on AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN.
Much of the counterculture, particularly in America, less so in Britain, much of the counterculture is not the counterculture anymore. It's the culture.
Because Donald Trump has won the election.
Because Donald Trump's won the election. The podcasters have won. Joe has probably more influence on public debate than the Washington Post these days. And that's great. I love it. I love the guy. But there comes a point, to quote Spider-Man, I think, where with great power comes great responsibility. And when you get the power of actually getting the megaphone in the public space, you should exercise your use of it judiciously. And it seems to me that exercising it by inviting people on who have invented views of history, have claims about things in the present they have simply not seen or reported from or been to or done anything about, is not the best use of it. And before
it is the Martha Zoller Show, and that's Douglas Murray, and we're not going to get him in the short term because his book tour is taking him all over the world, but we are still working on getting him in. And he said it was not to quote Spider-Man, and maybe Spider-Man did say that, but there's also Luke 12:48, where it says those who have been blessed with more, whether it be talents, opportunities, wealth, or knowledge, have a greater responsibility to use those blessings wisely for the benefit of others. And that is from Luke 48, and that's one of the kind of good news translations. But I got a message from my friend Joe up in Claremont, who said that he listened to the whole interview and he thought that Douglas Murray came across condescending. I'm not going to read the whole message, but he's right. Douglas Murray is a guy that comes across as a bit condescending. It probably is explained by the reason why he's single at his age. And basically, traveling the world alone. I'm not saying he doesn't have friends. I'm sure he has a lot of friends because he's a brilliant guy. I think I would love him, if I got a chance to sit in the same room with him because he's so knowledgeable. But I can see where people would think he's condescending because he believes, especially when it comes to Israel, that because he has been on the ground almost immediately after October 7th happened, but also before that, and that he's seen the people, he's talked to the people, he embedded with Hamas in addition to embedding with Israel. He does get a little condescending when people that are just pundits, and I'm going to put that comedian into the punditry world, that don't know anything about Israel, he gets a little condescending about it. And I'll agree with that 100%. I am listening to his book right now, and at the beginning they have a little introduction where it goes, this book has been read by the author. And he says it in a way that you're like, I'm the greatest person in the world. He thinks that. So Joe, I totally agree with your assessment of Douglas Murray, but I also think that this guy, and I believe it was, gosh, I wish I could get his name right. I think it's Dave Smith, I think. I completely understand how people can come to a different point of view. But there are a few issues, and I'm magnanimous on almost all issues. For me, as an evangelical Christian who, and I say this jokingly, but I mean this in all seriousness, I have read the book and I know how this story ends because I believe in every fiber of my being in the Word of God as it is put forth in the Old and New Testament. And if I get to the end of my life and find out I was wrong, then it doesn't matter because I think I've used my belief to live a better life and to be a better person. And if I go through my life living a better life and being a better person and find out at the end that's all there is, that's okay. But if I'm right and there is an afterlife, then the people that have questioned and not believed are going to pay a much higher price than I will. Okay? I can remember the moment, and this is Holy Week. I can remember the moment, even though I was raised in the church. I had fantastic parents. They took me to church regularly. I was involved. I believed. I went through all the processes. I was confirmed, and I was president of the Luther League, and I helped young people, and I did all of those things. I organized the volunteers at the church. I was a doer in the church that I grew up in. Lutheran Church of the Messiah at Claremont and Erie. It's now called something Open Table, which it became such a small church. But I was raised in a faith, okay? But it was not until, and I did all the steps you're supposed to do to, quote, become a Christian. But it was not until I was at my lowest point in my life. I was 29 years old, and I was in a house I didn't know how I was going to pay for. My first marriage had fallen apart, and my ex-husband had run up a bunch of debt, and I was literally in a place where I felt as broken as a human could be. That, number one, how could I have been so wrong about someone? How could I have loved someone that I was so wrong about? And how could I have let these unimportant things get in the way of my relationship with God? And I remember teaching 7th grade Sunday school several years after that, and they go, "You were that old? 29? Now 29 seems really young, and I know what I didn't know at 29, okay? But I had a moment where I felt completely broken, and I sometimes think that is the only time that God can really come in a true way, that I was... I said that I can't do this alone anymore, and I am sorry that I tried to do all of this on my own because I thought I knew better than God did. And I had this moment of only I could describe as peace, that I felt the presence of Jesus Christ in my life, and I knew that I was going to be okay. And I had a small moment like that when I was about 4 years old. When I used to walk up and down the street, people thought I was crazy. I would walk up and down the street with my hand out, and I told everybody I was holding hands with Jesus. And I know that came because my parents told me Jesus was everywhere, and it's kind of where in my little 4-year-old mind I dealt with that. But it's so funny because I see it so clearly in my mind's eye, which I know is not possible. I know it's not possible that I saw myself doing this, okay? I know that's not possible. But I have a clear picture in my mind's eye of that moment. But I was 29, and at that point, I just said, Lord, if you give me another chance, if you help me, I will, I will be faithful. And I will be faithful in good times and in bad times. And I've tried to do that since then. And I raised my own children. And look, I'm not batting 1,000 with my kids. I got 2 of my kids that go to church on a regular basis, 3, 2.5. One works at a church, so she has to go to church. And then my oldest son is just not that close. I mean, he is not disrespectful about it, but he is he's not completely convinced. And he's one of those guys that's super, super smart. And so he can kind of explain his way out of a lot of things that are faithful. And so I just keep praying for him every night. My husband and I, in the morning and in the evening, we pray for our children. We pray for our family. We pray for all the people that are on our prayer list. And the thing we've learned over time has been not to pray for these things. You know what I mean? You don't pray for, wealth. And I'm not the prosperity gospel. I pray that God's will be done in all of these situations. And I pray that I can accept God's will. And I don't mean to be such a proselytizer at this point in time, because I am truly respectful of people in the Jewish faith, in the Muslim faith, in the Hindu faith, the Buddhist faith. I find it interesting. And I do believe, and I think some Christians will disagree with me about this, I believe that these other faiths, in most cases, are a way that God presents himself to people in a way that they can understand it. And I'm not going to judge. I'm not the person to judge. God is the person to judge. I hope that through my example, though, that people will say, wow, that person seems like she's really in peace with her life. And so that's the way I feel about it. I love Holy Week. I know that it's sad on Friday, but I sing to myself a lot. Logan will attest to that. But I sing out loud a lot, too. I sing a lot of Easter songs. And the Palm Sunday music that we did on Sunday, I'm playing that in my head over and over. And then we'll be at the Maundy Thursday service, which will be very sad. And then we'll be on Easter morning. But I just love this time of year because it makes me feel so full in my faith. And you know what? If I get to the end of my life and I find out that all my faith did was help me through my life, I'll be okay with that. But I believe there's something more. And I've seen too much of it in the death of my father and the death of my mother and the death of my mother-in-law. I've seen too much of the other side of that and how happy they were to go there, that I believe there's something more there.
To hear the full versions of last week's Martha Zoller shows, go to the podcast page at accesswdun.com, and you can follow me on social media at Martha Zoller.